Are you ready, kids?
Hello, it's Employee a Million, and welcome back to SpongeComs. Today's episode is Season 3, Episode 20, or Episode 60 overall, SpongeBob Meets the Strangler and Pranks a Lot, both of which originally aired on Nickelodeon on October 11th, 2004, after a 6-month disappearance from the network. However, they were shown earlier on the DVD and video sets The Seascape Capers on January 6th, 2004. I choose by that logic that they were all able to be seen on American TV in a pre-Phil of the Future America, so yeah. I mean, there is still a case that these are the finales of Season 3, and SpongeBob Meets the Strangler was written by Paul Tibbett, Kent Osborne, C.H. Greenblatt, and Meriwether Williams. And it is just a really funny episode all around. How can you say that Season 3 is where things go bad when near the end of the season, like at the very, very end, when it's still got something to prove, it proves this. Just one of the wackiest episodes up to this point, and it's got so much going for it. Just this funny little bit at the start of SpongeBob making sure that he is exactly on time. It's just way funnier to me as an adult, just making sure I'm doing the hours that I want or have to do. And it's relatable to an adult, but the good thing is you don't know yet how it's going to come back and impact the episode. But yeah, this is a good iteration of SpongeBob. It's got, he seems to be naive, but he also seems to have things that bother him, like litter. You can read on his hat, litter bugs me. He hates litter bugs. And I feel like that really does come from, Steven Hillenburg and his, want to keep the ocean clean because, well, it's definitely a bit more polluted than it was 20 years ago, and it is just going to keep on getting more polluted, unfortunately, but better to just tell people that, polluting it is wrong and making, some comedy out of it so that message can get across, which is a good big old reason why littering is seen as a crime in SpongeBob. Like, you've got this criminal just leaving his rubbish around, but even in later episodes like Driven to Tears and Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful, littering and throwing stuff on the ground is still treated like a criminal offense. Like, even as far back as the paper, it wasn't taken too lightly by the narrative. So I do really like how Steve was able to still, at this point, inject some comedy out of his own thoughts about the ocean, because he did have nightmares about SpongeBob merchandise polluting the ocean, which is very unfortunate in hindsight, but just to keep this light and jovial, I always found it kind of dark how they have a character called the Strangler, or the Tattletale Strangler, that just strangles Tattletales. But it's funny because, well, SpongeBob doesn't have a neck, so how much can it really, damage him? Like, I know that he's, squishing the bottom of his sponge head later on, but yeah, it is still treated like a very serious thing. And yeah, I think that, really works, and just making it a lot more serious on SpongeBob's end, just give him something to fear. Like, this first half of the episode is all just build up to how dangerous the Strangler is, and you start to hear him more later on, and he's played by Thomas F. Wilson, who already has done the voice of Patrick's fake dad in I'm With Stupid and Flats and The Bully, among other roles. And he will continue to be on the show for little bit parts. Right now he's playing Cecil in the Patrick Star Show, so yeah, he's been around for a pretty long time. But I think that this is probably my very favorite performance of his, as the Strangler who just gets really fed up with SpongeBob to the point that, SpongeBob's so annoying, I'd rather be in jail than have the chance to kill him. But I mean, that's the beauty of this episode is that instead of just putting SpongeBob and making him really annoying around a morally grey main character like Squidward or Mrs. Puff sometimes, they just give him a flat out villain to annoy and be himself around, which just really works to such a great degree. Because you've almost got SpongeBob acting like a Looney Tunes character here. Like, this is how he would have acted in an old 40s or 50s Looney Tune if he was around back then. It's so, like, they're really laying it on thick that he is incredibly naive and incredibly clueless about this thing. But you've got little moments of snark where, he just has to know at some point that he's annoying the Strangler and that this bodyguard thing is a ruse. Like, he corrects himself like the Strangler does about calling him Strangler, bodyguard. But it's just really funny how when you take that into consideration, whether that's SpongeBob, admitting that he knows, or that SpongeBob just still, letting something stupid slip, that this is still, like, him, in these seasons at least, at his most, like, naive and annoying towards someone else. And it's someone that you completely want to see go to jail because he's just doing all this to murder SpongeBob. So that's really funny. And good old fun fact about this episode is that it is the last episode of the first 3 seasons to enter production. It's got the code 221, and there were about 120 available production codes for the first 3 seasons because that's 120 segments across 60 half hours. So I don't know what 120 was for. Maybe it was for the segments in UGG. Maybe it was for another episode that never made it into production. But production-wise, this is the end. And for a very brief moment in the previous Bubble Splash, you could see a blue screen with a date of May 17th, 2002 left in, which is about when that scene of SpongeBob at the store trying the perfume was animated. And I don't know if that would have been one of the first or last scenes for that episode to be produced by Rough Draft Korea, but according to Kenny Pittenger in an oral history in 2009, he was a layout supervisor for season 3, and his involvement in the show ended in February 2002. So I guess the timeline, it's still tracking that, they'd have these episodes, produce them over a set of months, and obviously May 17th, 2002 isn't the very day that SpongeBob would have ended production because you'd still have like a couple more weeks or even a month or 2 of post-production, adding sound effects and music, making trims so it fits the standard time. So SpongeBob as like a continuous production probably would have ended around July or August of 2002, which would have given them about 2 years exactly to work exclusively on the movie, which makes total sense in terms of like taking about 2 years to make an animated movie in those days. It's also just a really funny episode in terms of the background music used because, well, Hawaiian Calypso was just really great for all those scenes of SpongeBob just aggravating his bodyguard / Strangler. And it is a crime that it is only used in 3 episodes. Krabbyland, this, and Krusty Towers from season 4. Then they never used it again because it is such a jam. But I don't think it's as much of a jam as Saxo Boogie because, some people associate it with this episode, others associate it with SpongeGod on Duty, which I do. But there's no denying that it's really great here. Look at Squidward, he's having such a great time. But it really does show how integral music had become to the show, even just the background music, that it alone can be funny and increase the hilarity of a scene just by recognition or something. And personally, I do kind of like how this has a few callbacks to Party Pooper Pants with Larry turning into a live action lobster dish as he saw himself in the mirror, and the party wallpaper just inexplicably coming back whenever SpongeBob's having a party, which is for various reasons. His perfect attendance record, it's his birthday again for some reason. That's just brilliant. Come on. Like, I think that these few seconds just completely mog Party Pooper Pants, but that episode, despite not being the best, does have its merits, so, a pleasant enough callback. And here, in these last few minutes, you really do get to see Thomas F. Wilson just really show how good of a voice actor he is. Like, obviously everyone knows him as Biff from Back to the Future, or maybe as, one of those masks in that crummy PS2 Crash Bandicoot game. But, yeah, he's great on SpongeBob. He's always been great on SpongeBob, and just the extent to which he's annoyed by SpongeBob, and oh my gosh, SpongeBob's little confused face when SpongeBob is being told all this coming up, it's absolutely priceless. Just no matter how you view his role in the episode, just duh. So good. Gosh, this is a classic. Sorry if all of this is just me raving about the episode, but I've thrown in a few little fun facts here and there. Like, this episode has quite a few little fun facts you can talk about. Another one is that when the Nicktoons network launched as Nicktoons TV in May 2002, I want to believe, around the early months of that channel's operation, they would play a few behind-the-scenes featurettes during the commercials, just showing an aspect of the production on the Nicktoons, and I find it very interesting that they showed snippets of the voice recordings for this episode and Pranks a Lot, even though they wouldn't be shown in the US for a couple years after this. Like, they had these episodes on the back burner for a very long time, but just decided, these scenes of, the Strangler crying in agony were funny enough to just be shown behind the scenes early on. And I'll link it in the description, obviously, but it is hilarious seeing Steven Hillenburg laugh and just approve of the Strangler's horrific torture, just having cleats in his eyes, because Steve is really only known for being like a kind and laid-back dude. But yeah, he's just like, yeah, make it sound wimpier. That's such a great thing to see. And you can also briefly see Tom Kenny experimenting with SpongeBob's voice while singing Take Me Out to the Ball Game, figuring out how to make it impactful. Like, he sings in his usual tone for this era before trying a higher pitch, which would sound a bit more closer to how he'd sound in the movie Onward, before deciding, nah, that's too high, and going back down, but also trying out screaming it. And it is kind of interesting seeing towards the end of production of season 3, this golden period where SpongeBob's voice was kind of tolerable, Tom Kenny trying to experiment with SpongeBob's voice. That's kind of fun to see, and sort of how he was taking it to different places starting around here. And like, by the time the movie was recorded, it sounded very different, and it's a very divisive change to SpongeBob and how we perceive him, but I don't know, I don't mind the movie and post-movie voice that much. I wonder, I'm sort of on the fence of if I actually prefer it to the pre-movie voice, but, I guess it just depends on how I feel. But that was fun to see. You get to see a little production art of other classic Nicktoon characters like the Warner siblings there, so I'll link it in the description. It's a very fun little watch, and I'm thankful that I found it before I did this. Oh, I can finally talk about Pranks a Lot, which was written by Paul Tibbett, Kent Osborne, and Meriwether Williams. This was the final episode to air on Nickelodeon, with direct involvement from original creative director Derek Dryman and staff writer Meriwether Williams before she went on to work on the critically acclaimed Free For All for Showtime, which was a show I reviewed last year. Is kind of there's a couple reasons it didn't really catch on. But she did work on other cartoons, like kids' cartoons later on, like Camp Lazlo, Friendship is Magic, Adventure Time. So yeah, her career, it continued. This was also the last time Steven Hillenburg was credited as part of the writing team in the credits. After this, he'd have a myriad of executive credits for the rest of his life. He never completely left the show, and in a heartwarming sort of way, I guess you could say he's never really going to leave it. But that's a discussion for another time. Point is, this is the last time that he was really in the writer's room figuring things out with everyone else. So I think Pranks-A-Lot was a good note to end on. I know that it isn't really everyone else's cup of tea, but I don't know, I like it. I think it's a funny episode. As for other, staff departures, this is the final episode Kent Osborne is directly credited on in the credits. He'd stay a staff writer for season 4 until Good Neighbors before he'd work on stuff like Camp Lazlo and Brandy and Mr. Whiskers and I think Adventure Time. Sorry if this has just turned into a Where Are They Now segment, but yeah, there were a lot of staff changes after season 3 left production. And even if there was a 4th pre-movie season that they worked on while doing the movie, I still think some of these would have happened, like Meriwether Williams leaving because she wasn't on the movie. But yeah, I think that they all left on a pretty good note. Pranks-A-Lot, it's a very interesting episode. Well, first of all, because it was originally called Naked Pants, and it's sometimes called that on TV guides and on Amazon, but I guess they had to change it to be a little more appropriate. Plus, I think Pranks-A-Lot is a pretty funny name to do for a season finale / era finale, because it's a play on thanks a lot. So, yeah, thanks for watching us. That works, I think. And I also believe the novelty item ads in the title card are real scans from 60s comic books, and those were rife with scams and X-ray goggles that don't work and I don't know, ghost catchers that obviously don't work. They were just toys that advertised themselves as bigger than they really were. So it is pretty funny to turn that on its head, have a novelty toy like invisible spray that actually does work, but then comes back to bite SpongeBob and Patrick. So yeah, kind of a good little nostalgic callback for boomers just to get the episode started. But then you just have this wacky little cartoon to keep on going. Also, all the portraits of Patrick, that just gave me a great idea for the thumbnail for this, so I have to credit that. The Palace of Pranks really should make a return to the show someday because, SpongeBob is a comedy show, and obviously SpongeBob isn't always depicted as, a deliberate prankster, but having an interest like that can be funny. I don't know, have Mr. Krabs frequent it if he really wants to. And plus, Frank seems like he could have more uses. I really like his design, how he reacts around SpongeBob, and just how happy he is to be a prankster in his 50s or 60s. I think the eye patch signifies that he's old enough to have been in a war, but I don't know what kind of wars Bikini Bottom had. And as a little season finale, it's also pretty good that they have these little scenes of all the other characters, even though it's mostly about SpongeBob and Patrick. You've got a scene with Sandy, you've got a scene with Squidward, you've got a scene with Mrs. Puff, and they're all just running away from ghosts, but it's a funny enough way to cap things off. And Scooter, he just kind of lost relevance after this point, but it was nice to see him again. I know why he didn't really become a mainstay SpongeBob character, because he just looks a bit too generic, but I don't know, I think that's pretty funny. I also feel like Pranks-A-Lot was just sort of a last-minute excuse to give the animators a break from drawing SpongeBob and Patrick just all the time. It's kind of funny to look at these shots of just complete blankness with Tom Kenny and Bill Fagabaki talking about just having to imagine the invisible SpongeBob and Patrick in their head. Like, I don't know. I think it wouldn't have been as funny if you just have sort of like black and white, semi visible SpongeBob and Patrick ghosts just sort of walking around, because I don't know, it's funnier to just leave that up to your imagination. I know it's kind of funny how, they would be gradually redesigned after this, so kind of a missed opportunity to see them like this one last time, but I don't know. Some season 4 episodes go back to the season 2 and 3 model sheets, so it's not like this is the very end of this look for the show. But it is sort of the very end of me being able to excuse blatant animation errors, because SpongeBob only has $1 to spend on pranks. But for some reason, when Frank whips out the invisible spray, he has like at least 3 notes. Like, how does that work? Was SpongeBob just, what's the word? Hassling? He was just hassling until, Oh, and also the glue appearing out of nowhere. But that's funny. That's for a joke. I don't know exactly what, SpongeBob spawning more money had to do. But I do really like this climax. Just gives them a chance to do another Mr. Krabs episode at the very last minute. And just sort of show that SpongeBob and Patrick's pranking is going a bit too far if they're just going to burn money for no reason other than to upset Mr. Krabs. But yeah, it's funny. It's good and cathartic to see SpongeBob and Patrick being embarrassed at the very end, and I don't know how people would feel about this sort of ending today, but it's cartoony enough to not cross your mind the implications. And I mean, there are a few other little jokes that I can think about, like the Foxy, necklace that just fits Mr. Krabs too well for some reason. And there's a minor Ghostbusters reference when Krabs says, "I ain't afraid of no ghosts," and I think that line has been around forever, but at this point we just associate it with Ghostbusters. But I think that Mr. Krabs calling the paddle ball a spectre deflector was just a total coincidence, because it was also used in Danny Phantom, which was entering production around the same time that SpongeBob was leaving production. But I don't know. That seems like a generic enough term to not really, cross your mind if you like both Danny Phantom and SpongeBob. It's probably a coincidence. But it is kind of funny that it's a paddleball, because one of the very first episodes in the next season is about SpongeBob being really bad at a paddleball game. So, gotta wonder if they had this episode on their minds. But yeah, this was a pretty good episode. It's got enough memorable scenes for me, and I don't know if it's just because it's the end of an era, but I don't know. I just find it a really funny way to end season 3, end what everyone dubs these days the pre-movie era of SpongeBob, and I'm very excited that the next commentary track I do is going to be of the movie, so look out for that soon. And that was SpongeBob Meets the Strangler and Pranks a Lot. Last time I asked you what your favorite musical episode is, and I got a lot of very varied answers. Snake Man said it's a SpongeBob Christmas. Sparkling with Nights said SpongeBob Christmas and Hello Bikini Bottom. Pizzaroli said Christmas Who and SpongeBob Christmas. Mew Master said it's a SpongeBob Christmas. A lot of people said it's a SpongeBob Christmas, just saying. Dashel Rose said, I know some people are going to disagree with me, but I would say Atlantis Square Pantis might be my favorite. I mean, you're allowed to have an opinion. That's good. I mean, I will say in advance that at least Atlantis Square Pantis has a lot of variety in genre, so I can see why that can appeal to some people. Bryce Fawn says it's a SpongeBob Christmas and Hello Bikini Bottom, which helps that both episodes are from season 8. And Sweet Dude said F is for Friends and the one where Gary chooses Patrick over SpongeBob. I think you mean Pressure. Best Day Ever and the Christmas Special are great too. Topic has got to be Band Gigs. So that's a lot of very varied answers. So it kind of proves that SpongeBob's been good with music. I'm surprised no one said The Sponge Who Could Fly, considering the songs in that episode were basically one of the only things I praised. But, season 3 ended on a pretty good note. It is a pretty good season of SpongeBob, one of the best they've ever made. I don't know, I fight in my head over whether it's better than season 1. Season 2, I just love almost entirely from start to finish, but what the second best is between 1 and 3, that is a bit of a tougher thing to crack, but there is no denying that season 3 left SpongeBob temporarily on a very strong note. Tons of classics in this. Everyone had really gotten the hang of what they were doing, and yeah, this is just a great place to leave SpongeComs for now. But the next thing I'm going to do a commentary track for is the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, since that comes between season 3 and 4. And you're going to see me post that on the 1st of May, SpongeBob's 24th anniversary. I mean, SpongeBob is a comedy show, and how many numbers out there are funnier than 24? So thank you so much for tuning in for all these years, and I'll see you when there's a dinghy off the port bow. Goodbye for now.
SpongeBob will be right back on Nickelodeon.